25 years ago, as part of my training as a post-ordination training, I went to a convent in Ham. And we walked around the garden. And when I walked around the garden, I thought, wow, there is an amazing atmosphere here. Because the nuns there had been praying in that garden for so many years. You sensed the presence of God there. And I said to the nuns there, can I come here on a Friday? And for many years, I went every Friday. In fact, the nuns knew me as Man Friday. I come on Friday and pray there because I loved it so much. I don't get there every Friday now. I try and get there maybe once a month. And then when this prayer room opened, we trialed it before Christmas. I walked into the prayer room. I thought, wow, it's just like Ham Convent. I sense the presence of God here. I don't need to go to Ham anymore. I'm going to come to this prayer room. And I absolutely love this prayer room. And I am so excited that it's going to be open now, 24 hours a day, every day of the week. And there are going to be people praying in there day and night. I would really encourage you, just try it once. Just go in there once and try. And I pretty much guarantee you that if you do, you'll want to go back there, as I do, over and over again. I booked it all the way through to Easter. Not the whole time, but although I wouldn't mind that. It sounds rather nice. But I booked, I think, an hour or two a week all the way through to Easter because I'm so looking forward to being in that. All this is the initiative of Pete Greig. Pete Greig heads up 24/7 prayer, not just in this country, but all around the world. It's one of the most exciting movements of our generation, and we're hugely privileged that Pete is on the staff here. Part of his time, half of his time is 24/7, half of his staff is on the staff here, and he heads up 24/7 prayer, and this prayer room is his initiative, and he's going to be speaking to us today, and it's going to be launched on Tuesday. The Bishop of London is coming here at 7 o'clock on Tuesday. This is going to be a fantastic occasion. I know 7 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday is not a convenient time for anyone, but it's going to be worth it. So may I encourage you, if you can, to put that in your diary, 7 o'clock here on Tuesday morning with the Bishop of London. It'd be great for the Bishop of London to see the whole church coming together to pray just for 1 hour. Between 7 and 8 on Tuesday morning. But right now, we have Pete Greig with us this morning, right here. Would you give him a very warm welcome as he comes to speak to us?
Thank you, Man Friday. So good. Well, very happy new year to you. 2013, term about to restart. Some of us have been back at work for a while. Just raise your hand if you made a New Year's resolution, if you don't mind. If you made a New Year's resolution, okay. That's about 40% of the population apparently do that. Now, confession time. We're 6 days in. Just give me a wave if you have already broken one of your New Year's resolutions. I won't ask if any of it relates to the one-year Bible. I'm sure it doesn't. You know, about 88% of people who make New Year's resolutions break them. I still think it's amazing that 12% keep them. And, of course, resolutions are important. John Maxwell says you will never change your life until you change something that you do daily. And I'm sure he is right. But if, like me, you ever had those 3 dreaded words written on your school report, could try harder, then you'll know that just trying hard has limited success. And most of us, if we're honest, when we look at the challenges of our lives, realize that we need more than just resolve, good as resolve is. We need more than just resolutions. Perhaps we need some kind of revolution in the way we live. And you may say, well, you're overstating it a little bit just to make it rhyme, and partly I am. But also, when we look at the challenges of our world, when we look at the challenges of what would it take to really turn things around in our workplaces, or perhaps with some of the difficult family relationships you may be wrestling with, or maybe even some of the stuff going on in your inner world with the way you think, then perhaps revolution isn't too strong as we look ahead to 2013. And so we're going to look together at Isaiah chapter 62. This is page 756 in the blue Bibles, Isaiah 62. And the context of this is that the people of Israel certainly need a breakthrough. They are despised and desolate. They are being plundered by the enemy. It's been like one step forward, two steps back. And into this context, the prophet Isaiah brings a wonderful word of hope. Isaiah 62, starting at verse 1. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not remain quiet, till her righteousness shines out like the dawn, her salvation like a blazing torch. The nations will see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You will be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will bestow. You will be a crown of splendor in the Lord's hand, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. No longer will they call you deserted or name you desolate, but you will be called Hephzibah, that means delightful, and your land Beulah, that means married. For the Lord will take delight in you, and your land will be married. As a young man marries a young woman, so will your people marry you. As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you. I have posted watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem, and they will never be silent day or night. You who call on the Lord, give yourselves no rest, and give him no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes her the praise of the earth. It's amazing to think that that prophecy of Isaiah is partially being fulfilled in our midst even as we speak. Because from midnight on New Year's Day, people have been, as it were, watchmen on the walls, calling out to God night and day for Zion's fortunes to be restored, for the city of God to be repopulated, for him to move. And so that means right now, as I speak, there's someone in the prayer room praying. Last night, as we slept, there were people in there calling out to God. The launch, the unofficial launch, we've got the official launch with the Bishop of London on Tuesday morning, the unofficial launch on New Year's Eve, which was a little more relaxed. We had crowd surfing and Tim Hughes leading worship. It was the most amazing night. Some of you were there. We don't quite know what happened. We think it must just have been God doing something, because so many people came. Bill Cusack, Emmy Wilson, people who've been in this church 20, 30 years, said they've never seen this building so full. It was standing room only, no chairs. We had well over 1,000 people in here, filling the balconies, filling the crypt, filling the spring. And then we had queues going right down to the Brompton Road and then around the corner down towards Harrods. And we had to turn people away, and they were coming here at midnight to pray. Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's extraordinary. I haven't seen this level of hunger before. And of course, there's an excitement because we were launching into this year of prayer. And it wasn't just the numbers. At one point in the evening, I said, look, who's got a testimony of something God's done in 2012? You just want to give glory to God. And you never quite know who's going to come. And the first guy came up, he stood right here, and this is what he said. He said, I want to give glory to God because in 2012, God brought me back to life from the dead, literally. And while we were all shaking our heads and trying to make out what he'd said and getting the clinical details, the next person came up and said, I became a Christian in 2012, and everyone went crazy. And then our friend Rahil came up, and he said, well, this time last year I was a Hindu priest, and now I've met Jesus, I'm baptized, I'm born again, and I'm living for him. And I just thought, this is amazing. God is on the move. Yes, there's bad news. Yes, there's challenges. But there is a lot of fuel for faith right now. And he's on the move in our midst. And this is an exciting time to be at the beginning of a new year, especially as we commit ourselves to pray. Jesus revolutionizes lives. He can do that for you in 2013. Maybe you aren't sure if you're a Christian here today. You're wondering if it's all true. Well, I'd encourage you to think about doing the Alpha course Wednesday after next. We start in this building. To just take some time this term, at the start of this year, to explore the Christian faith. If you've seen The Life of Pi, brilliant, brilliant film. I'd encourage you to go and see it. It's like Titanic, but with animals. And there's this great line in there where Pi says, to choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. And there's a place for doubt. We all need to ask questions. It's important. But you can't build your life on uncertainty. Ultimately, everyone has to make some form of faith commitment and then say, I'm going to build my life on this. Or maybe you're here as a Christian, but if you look back on 2012, you think that it wasn't exactly the most dynamic year of your life in terms of your faith. You were just kind of slightly going through the motions. Church was a bit like a commute. 2013 is an opportunity to breathe life back into the dry bones of faith, to cut out the middleman and to pray. Someone sent me a prophetic word, which I think may be for someone here this morning. He said, he sensed God was saying this: you feel like your spiritual life isn't fit for purpose. You've grown weary and slightly disillusioned, but the Father wants you to know that He still believes in you. He's waiting to meet with you in the prayer room. He has so many things He wants to speak to you about. You will become a watchman on the walls. You are going to burn even as you come alive in Him. You know, one of the most encouraging things I did over Christmas, I do it every year, is I look back on all that had been going on with the 24/7 prayer movement in the year that had just been. And it's just incredible to see all the answers to prayer. And it's often the little things that impact me the most. So there's a story last year of the man who went into a South Korean prayer room. And he had been addicted to smoking for 32 years. And his testimony was, in 1 hour in the prayer room, the addiction was completely broken. He said, I left the prayer room without any desire to smoke anymore, completely set free. And then there's another story about a lady who went into a prayer room in South Africa. She was actually wheeled in because she'd been in a wheelchair for 7 years, unable to walk. And she was prayed for in there and was completely healed and pushed her own wheelchair out of the prayer room at the end of the hour. Does that stuff happen all the time? No. Does it happen sometimes? You better believe it. Why? Because Jesus is still alive and still doing today the things He did 2,000 years ago. He hasn't changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so we have every reason to expect that His goodness and His love will break out in works of healing, in works of power, in works of forgiveness, bringing hope to lives that are desperate, bringing life to dead bones, as we were just singing. And then there's an amazing story of a bunch of very brave young people last year in a ghetto, a township in Cape Town called Manenberg. And the situation was so violent, they decided the only thing they could do is pray. And they established a 24/7 prayer room in the middle of a gang war between 7 different warring factions. People were being shot dead, innocent people, all around them. And they spent a week, night and day, with gunshots going off, praying. And on the last day of their prayer vigil, a ceasefire was brokered, peace broke out, and they haven't had any return to violence since that moment as they persevered in prayer. And so I love these stories. If you were at Focus, you'll remember the lovely story of that gorgeous girl, part of this church, maybe here, I don't know, Margot Murray. And Margot very bravely shared her testimony. And it was this: Margot had such bad eczema that her fingers were bleeding and cracked, and she had sores all over her body. Her doctor said it's the worst case of childhood eczema he'd treated in 15 years. Her toenails and fingernails were coming off. And she, riding around the site at Focus on her little bicycle with girls' bikes that age have bits of ribbon and things on them. It seems very peculiar to me. But anyway, she was riding her little bike around, accessorized. And she arrived at the 24/7 prayer room. She went in and someone prayed with her. And to this day, we don't know who it was. But she was healed. She was just healed. And she came up on the stage and showed us her toenails that had grown back on. And we were all staring at a child's feet with toenails, trying to get excited about it. But she was excited because she knew those toenails hadn't been there and the sores had vanished from her body. And her mum, Shona, had been in touch with me recently, said she's still better. God healed her as she prayed. And so it's good to tell these stories of faith, isn't it? Because it reminds us that God's on the move and he's alive. And all of them had to persevere. 32 years smoking, 7 years in a wheelchair, a week of praying as the gunshots kept going on and peace isn't yet breaking out. Margot herself had had prayer earlier. In fact, Nicky Gumbel had invited people to come forward for healing. And her mum had said, Margot, do you want to go? And she said, no. And her mum said, why not? She said, I tried it once before and healing didn't work. But then she went into that prayer room and got prayer that time, and she was healed. Perseverance, like those watchmen on the walls who are not silent day or night. They will not back down. They don't just climb up on the walls and say, please God, and go to bed. But they are passionate. They're crying out together. William Wilberforce knew it. 26 years fighting slavery. And he knew that he had to engage not just politically, but also prayerfully. So he said on one occasion, above all things, guard against neglecting God in the secret place of prayer. John Wesley understood this. He said, God does nothing but by prayer and everything with it. I'm so inspired that Nicky Gumbel leads this church, one of the busiest people I know. He always pretends that he doesn't do anything, but he is one of the busiest people I know. And that he is prioritizing time in that prayer room, leading by example, not just preaching, but praying. You know, the only thing that is more important than telling your friends about God is telling God about your friends. It's the only thing more important. Talking, praying about your friends. If God has called you to lead in any sphere of society, I do hope you're praying for those that you lead. Maybe you line manage someone at work or several people. Well, you're probably called to pray for them too. You pray for your kids. School teachers, are you praying for those in your class? You may say to me, well, Pete, look, that's fine. I know that prayer is powerful. I know that prayer is important, but it is so difficult. I don't know what to say to God. My mind wanders. I don't feel worthy. The thought of an hour in a prayer room is daunting and bewildering, to say the least. And I'd have to reply and say, I really do understand what you're saying, because all of this began for me with the day when I finally acknowledged that I was rubbish at prayer. If you had asked me to draw up a list of my worst spiritual failures, and it would have been a long list, number one would have been prayer and fasting. It's God's sense of humor, I think. But ultimately, perhaps the reason why 24/7 has spread all over the world is that so many people find prayer difficult, even though they know it's important. And a prayer room just makes it a little bit easier. You're praying, as Nikki said, in a place where other people have prayed before. It's easier. When you've got 5-minute chunks going through the hour to help you pray, it makes it easier. The prayer room gives you a place of privacy to be still and to listen in a very busy world, a very busy church. I had a great conversation with my son Danny. Just before Christmas, we were going through his school report together. And let's just say he hadn't clothed himself in glory in science. He clothed himself in great glory elsewhere. And so I said to him, now, Danny, what's going wrong in science? And he looked at me very indignantly. He said, Dad, I'm brilliant at science. But I was looking at the data, which was somewhat conflicting his own opinion. He said, I'm brilliant at science. I said, well, what's gone wrong? He said, well, I just can't remember anything the teacher tells me, but I'm very good at it. You know, if we're going to learn from the rabbi, we need to take time to listen to him. And the prayer room is a place where you can be still and know his presence and his lordship. I think the prayer room is also somewhere where we can pray the way God made us to pray. We can pray creatively, differently. We're all made differently, and so it makes sense we should pray differently. I was reminded how different we all are when I watched The Sound of Music this Christmas with my wife. It was as though we were watching different films. My wife is very nice and very sweet and very lovely, and I think her ideal of a movie would be The Sound of Music without the Nazis, you know? Just lots of skipping through the Alps and singing songs with children. I find that a little sickly sweet. So my ideal of Sound of Music would be The Sound of Music without Maria, you know? Just lots of military men in classic cars with firm control of their children. It sounds absolutely brilliant to me. We're also different. You know, Sir Isaac Newton said, in the absence of any other evidence, the human thumb alone would convince me of the existence of God. Why? Because your fingerprints are different from the person sitting next to you. You are unique. God didn't make you to look like anyone else, so please don't feel that you've got to pray like anyone else either. One of the journeys you can go on this year in the prayer room and just in your own personal prayer life, of course, pray anywhere. Don't just pray in the prayer room. But one of the journeys you can go on is saying, God, how did you make me to pray? Is it with others or is it alone? Is it out loud or is it quiet? Is it journaling? Is it with particular types of music? Is it with great passion? Is it more of a duty? Is it with liturgy? Do you find it more helpful to pray other people's prayers? Do you want to pace around the room and read out the Psalms? How does prayer work for you? Discover it, and it will create your own language of relationship with God. I always remember in one of the first prayer rooms, sitting quietly at the side one day, and there was a lovely chap called Nick Haig, who's now a vicar. Was in doing an hour of prayer. And he just came in and he just knelt down and prayed silently in his head for almost an hour. I was overwhelmed. I was so impressed. And then at the end of the hour, I remember we heard a sort of gaggle of voices approaching the prayer room door. And into the room there burst this very glamorous group of female students looking like they were all dolled up for a night out on the town. And they were just chatting away and laughing, and it was quite a contrast to the hour of silence. And then they all prayed for Nick, and he went off, and I don't think they saw me sitting in the corner quietly, and I thought, this is going to be interesting. And they went to the stereo, and you'll never guess what they put on for their prayer time. ABBA. ABBA. I was getting indignant, abusing the place of prayer. Super purr, trooper purr, lights are gonna find me. And they all started dancing around, chatting away, handbags on the floor. And just before I could get too indignant, I realized that they were starting to call out their prayers to God and worship, and then they'd have a little gossip, and then they'd have a little bit of intercession. And I said to God, is this okay? Are you okay with this? How are you feeling about this? He said to me, I'm rather enjoying it. It's quite refreshing. There is a reason why I say in the scriptures, sing unto me a new song. I get so bored of Tim Hughes. Pray the way God made you. You know, prayer, of course, doesn't just change us. Prayer really does change the world, as we've been saying. I remember an amazing time where a student with he's a very cool guy, short little dreadlocks, like little stubby ones, who wasn't yet a Christian, but he had started to come to the prayer room and was asking questions. And he had a part-time job in B&Q down in Bognor Regis. And so on his way into B&Q one day, he prayed a prayer. He said, God, if you're real, then could you speak to me, please, at work today? I mean, this is B&Q. And there he was at work, stacking shelves, when the most amazing thing happened. A frail little old lady came up to him, tapped him on the arm, and he looked down at her, and she said to him, young man, I believe I am to tell you, God loves you. And then she tootled off. And he stood there, I mean, no one had ever done that before. No one had ever done it since. As far as I know, no one's ever done that in B&Q in global history. And he left work that day. Do you know what he said? I don't know what I think about this. He said, I think it was an angel, not just a little old lady. I don't know. So he went back to the student digs that he was living in. He said to everyone, none of them are Christians, he said, an angel, disguised little old lady, came, spoke to me at B&Q today. And they responded with a sort of cynicism you would expect. Now, one of them had a part-time job at the local Butlins there in Bognor, if you know it. And it was the end-of-season party. And she went into the end-of-season party. The site had been shut down. Only staff with the special staff passes were on site. And they were in one of the bar areas. There was security on the door to make sure it was only for the staff. And she was in there at the party with these strange words about her friend having seen an angel at B&Q that day going round her head. And the most incredible thing happened in the most unlikely place imaginable. A complete stranger walked up to her at the party. No one recognized him. He looked at her and said, you look sad. Strange thing to say at a party. And then after a pause, he said this to her. One of your friends became a Christian today, and it's time for you to do the same. Her friends were all going, weirdo. The guy just wandered off. And no one saw him come or saw him go or knew who he was. And she went home that day and said, I think, you know that thing that happened to you in B&Q? I think it just happened to me at Butlins. Now, I don't know if they were angels. I'm pretty sure, actually, it was just a really lovely old lady who goes around going up to dreadlocked young guys in B&Q saying, God loves you, and running away. And I'm pretty sure as well that the guy in Butlins probably wasn't an angel. It's probably just... Well, I like the idea that out there's a James Bond-style evangelist who breaks into sealed rooms, has bang-on words of knowledge, and then disappears without a trace. But maybe it was an angel. Maybe the angels are there in heaven getting so frustrated, saying, why don't they tell people about you more, Lord? And Jesus goes, well, they're a bit embarrassed, actually. What? And the angels are going, holy, holy, holy. We're not embarrassed. And maybe once in a while, an angel hops over the back fence of heaven and comes down just a quick bit of evangelism. And then God spots them and goes, come back here right now. It's the human's job. And they come and they get their wrist. I don't know. Don't hang me on the theology here. I'm just telling you, these are stories that my friends have experienced. And what we found was that as we gave ourselves to prayer, that the spiritual temperature went up, not just in the church, but out there in shops and parties and amongst our friends who don't yet know Jesus. As we embark on this new year together, there's probably never been a better time for any one of us to push into prayer. To decide that 2013 is the year when we will give ourselves to God's presence in a deeper way than ever before. The room is there. The rota is there. The question is, will you be there?